presenting the general theory of the translation company. Surely you've heard the name Keynes, right? John Maynard Keynes was the most influential economist of modern times, so you've probably at least been exposed to the name before. When you hear somebody talk about Keynesian economics at a party, you may not know enough to join into the conversation, but you've heard of it, which means you know just enough to smile, nod, and then excuse yourself to go find a more interesting conversation. Don't worry, we aren't going to focus too much on this subject. All you need to know to get our point across here is that Keynes published his big claim to fame in 1936 under the title The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, or TGTEIM, as nobody except us calls it, ever. And people haven't stopped talking about him since. His theory defined the conversation in his field for the next century. It challenged the long-held classical economic theories of the time and sought to bring about a revolution in economic studies. Not everybody agreed with it, but everybody was talking about it. It forced the conversation away from the status quo and opened people's eyes to a whole new way of approaching a long-established discipline. It is with unapologetic lack of both humility and self-awareness that we therefore would like to do the same for the language services industry as Keynes did for the field of economics. We present to you the general theory of the translation company. Please, hold your applause. We have a lot of ground to cover here. Our theory is not entirely new. However, there are some new concepts that we present, some that we recycle, and some that are just plain borrowed from other sources. The general theory of the translation company was born as a sudden spark of inspiration for Renato years ago during a dinner conversation with a colleague who wanted to better understand the industry. Renato took out a napkin and scribbled down the key components of the theory, which we identified in this book as market influencers, support activities, and core functions. Later, Renato would further formalize the theory while working at Common Sense Advisory by publishing his ideas for the whole industry to study. In the years since then, he continually worked on it. When Renato and Tucker teamed up to write this book, Tucker brought his own ideas and experience to the conversation, and the theory was refined further. But at the heart of it, the general theory is basically the same as when it was first written down on that cocktail napkin years ago. Concepts have been sharpened and the structure has changed a little, but the basic tenets have not changed. They have not needed to change because they have withstood the test of time. The value of the general theory of the translation company isn't so much that it presents new information, but that it presents information in a new way that allows us to take a more critical look at the language services industry and our place in it. Perhaps this won't start a revolution, but it can pave the way for a more critical analysis of our industry, which is long overdue. We need to start a new discussion in the industry, and the general theory of the translation company provides the framework for such a discussion. In the sections that follow, we examine the language services industry and the three components of the general theory of the translation company, which once again are the market influencers, LSP support activities, and core functions. As we conclude our discussion on market influencers, we take the next step to narrow the conversation and look at LSPs and how they operate within this ecosystem. In the subsequent section, we narrow our focus to the core function of the LSP and how these work to add value to the language services value chain. First, though, let's start out with a high-level overview of the general theory of the translation company to provide some much-needed context. Figure 1, a visual depiction of the general theory of the translation company. Figure 1 shows three concentric circles. The outside circle lists market influencers, which consist of new entrants, customers, substitutes, rivalry, and suppliers. The middle circle includes support activities, which includes management, structure, culture, finance, facilities and HR, technology, and quality assurance. The center circle includes the core functions: vendor management, project management, and sales. As you can see from Figure 1, the general theory of the translation company is broken down into three separate components, starting at the outside of the model with market influencers, then moving inward to support activities, and then core functions at the center. The flow from the outside towards the center is intentional. Successful LSPs always take this approach of starting with market analysis and then using the information to set up support activities and structure that enable their core functions to add the maximum amount of value. Any other order of doing things is putting the cart before the horse. Figure 2. The 3 components of the general theory of the translation company and their roles. Figure 2 shows the 3 components of the general theory listed right across from their roles, starting with market influencers, which serve the role of industry forces leading to risk and opportunity. The support activities correspond to create a framework to minimize risk and maximize opportunity to empower the core functions. And lastly, the core functions simply add value. Moving on from Figure 2. Evaluation of the market influencers reveals the forces that are leading to risk and opportunity. This is then used to define and set up support activities to minimize risk and maximize opportunity. Finally, the core functions are those activities that are carried out by the LSP to add value. Since the core functions are where value is created, you may be tempted to skip the other sections in this book. However, we beg you to be patient. There is a reason we do not start with the core functions. If you are a project manager who is thinking of starting your own company, you can't just go out and project manage your way to fame and fortune. You need to slow down and make sure you are thinking strategically to set up an infrastructure that is going to allow you to scale your business. And it all starts with evaluating the market influencers. Likewise, if you do not set up and maintain the necessary support activities to support your core functions, you will find yourself struggling to deliver any value and will soon be out of business. Or you could be the owner or CEO of an already established LSP and you're experiencing aggressive growth. Perhaps you are worried that your company may not be able to sustain the growth, and so you want to take the time to ensure that you are setting up your teams for success. By using the principles in the general theory of the translation company, you evaluate the competitive landscape in which you are operating and put in place the strategy and structure that your LSP needs to continue sustainable growth.